Since ancient times, God created the first humans, followed by the appearance of witches. He bestowed upon witches a portion of his power so they could guide the weak human race, allowing both to coexist and support each other. At that time, humans and witches together made a vow that they would devote all their strength to serve humanity. However, as time passed, this sacred vow was gradually forgotten, and now humans no longer view witches as allies. Instead, they harbor hatred and nurture the intention to eliminate witches. In the harsh desert landscape, Adonis and Chloe are silently crossing the burning sand dunes to find their way to the border. The young man repeatedly complains about the scorching heat, wishing Chloe would use ice to cool them down, but she firmly refuses. While arguing, Adonis suddenly looks at the phone he made himself and discovers their current location. This worries Chloe immensely, as she fears the enemy might track them down. Facing her concern, Adonis just smiles reassuringly and explains that this device has been modified. The signals emitted are no longer ordinary waves, but have been replaced with multi-dimensional waves combined with summoning magic. So even if the army uses triangulation methods, no matter how precise, they cannot trace them. He emphasizes that in this era, paper maps are no longer necessary. These words wound Chloe's pride, and she can't help but teach Adonis a lesson. After calming down, Chloe continues to lead the way, asking Adonis to follow her. But deep down, he always wonders why they have to live in hiding like this. Faced with his innocence, Chloe only explains that because they are both witches, they must conceal themselves like ninjas. Only then can they survive. She adds that her greatest wish is to find a place that can accept their existence, while also giving Adonis the opportunity to learn and develop. Hearing this, he again expresses his desire to forever be Chloe's faithful disciple. She teases that he seems to only want to be a pilot flying a plane, making Adonis's face flush with embarrassment. Meanwhile, doubt rises within him, not understanding how Chloe can be so carefree and full of faith in life, while he himself is filled with hatred toward the Lydia Empire, even longing to personally eliminate them all. Before their conversation ends, enemies detect them and prepare to attack. Adonis immediately wants to counterattack, but Chloe quickly stops him, standing in front to shield him and using ice magic to freeze all the enemies. This is promptly reported to the superiors, infuriating Goth. A subordinate suggests that the ice witch has great power and that reinforcements should be sent immediately. But as soon as he finishes speaking, he receives punishment for daring to contradict the emperor. Goth immediately orders heavy weapons to be brought to deal with Chloe. Meanwhile, Adonis feels frustrated at being repeatedly prevented from taking action. Chloe merely says that his magic is still immature and insufficient to handle the current situation. Annoyed by this assessment, Adonis conjures a gigantic sword to prove his abilities. He clearly understands that Chloe fundamentally doesn't want him to kill fellow humans, which is why she always restrains him. But Adonis's heart cannot suppress the desire to protect Chloe with his own strength. Just as the confrontation is about to enter a fierce phase, a strange device completes data synchronization, immediately activating spatial teleportation and taking them directly to the central square of the capital. There, Goth is addressing a large crowd. He recalls that from ancient times, humans relied on witches for survival, but this caused humanity to live without dignity. Now, thanks to the remarkable development of science and technology, humans have modern machinery in their hands. And this technological explosion will be the new revolution. Goth believes that even without magic, humans can control everything, and to demonstrate their dominance, he calls for the elimination of all witches. As those words echo, Chloe and Adonis appear in the middle of the square. Faced with this humiliation and exposed hatred, Adonis cannot contain his anger and immediately rushes toward Goth, but is quickly captured by soldiers. Seeing this, Chloe unleashes her power, threatening the emperor to release Adonis. Originally, she didn't want to confront humans for fear that Adonis would lose his place of refuge, but this concession is seen as a threat. When Chloe casts ice magic to attack, her power suddenly vanishes meaninglessly. Goth proudly declares that she cannot understand the current power of science, while mockingly saying that now witches have become the ones hunted by humans. Saying this, he approaches her, tears her clothes, and delivers a heavy slap before the gleeful eyes of the crowd. The surrounding people continuously ridicule and photograph this humiliating scene. In desperation, Adonis struggles multiple times to save Chloe, but is always suppressed. When he sees the soldiers preparing to finish him off, Chloe kneels to beg Goth to spare Adonis's life, even lying that she had kidnapped and enslaved him. Those words cut deep into Adonis's heart. He is so pained that he can only try to use his magic pen to save her. But all is in vain. In this life or death moment, Chloe only has time to whisper thanks to Adonis for appearing in her life, as thanks to him, she found comfort amidst hardship. Before she can confess her feelings, Goth mercilessly kills her. A barrage of bullets from the soldiers rains down, tearing Chloe's body apart right before Adonis's eyes. He can only scream helplessly, in pain as he witnesses the enemy take Chloe's head to entertain the emotionless crowd. Many years later, in a damp prison, two female inmates fight over a loaf of bread. Doroka watches and cannot bear it, so she shares her meager food with both. Anna worries that Doroka will go hungry, but Doroka just smiles and says she is as healthy as an elephant. Anna reflects and laments that although human technology has advanced tremendously thanks to the super-industrial revolution, war and conflict have never ended. There are still those who believe that eliminating witches will bring happiness to humanity. Doroka takes out a wooden doll and performs a small skit to comfort her friend. Suddenly, a prison guard enters and calls for number 218. That person is actually Anna, but Doroka proactively steps forward to take her place. When she reaches the prison office, the warden observes her and orders Doroka to remove her clothes, using the excuse that he needs to inspect her before handing her over to distinguished guests. He brazenly declares that to maintain this place, taxes are needed, and those taxes are the blood and bodies of Lydia's citizens. Doroka sees women being tortured lying in the corner and cannot help but shudder with anger. The man even boasts that the Lydia Empire has elevated human civilization and uses military science to control witches. After these arrogant words, he roughly pushes Doroka down, forcing her to display expressions of pain. But Doroka rises up, bites his finger hard, and quickly runs away. While escaping, she manages to grab Palpal's phone and orders it to open all the cells. Initially, the device doesn't recognize the command because it's not the owner's voice. But after hundreds of attempts, Doroka perfectly mimics his voice. Immediately, all prison doors open, and inmates pour out in chaos. When Doroka opens the secret room, guards arrive. But at that moment, the cage shatters, revealing Adonis inside, fully awakened. Adonis, in his fury, tears apart the chains binding him, his fierce aura making the surrounding soldiers tremble, each one frozen by fear. While everyone stands motionless, Adonis immediately lunges forward, each quick and clean stab taking down one after another, blood flowing all over the ground. The last soldier cannot escape his fate, receiving a fatal shot from him and collapsing on the spot. At that moment, Doroka sees Adonis approaching her and quickly begs him to stop. But Adonis silently helps her destroy the handcuffs on her wrists, then turns and leaves, leaving Doroka with eyes both terrified and compassionate. Shortly after, the prisoner of war camp becomes chaotic, forcing emergency forces to be mobilized to deal with the jailbreak. Meanwhile, Bureau Chief Yamato is urgently ordering a blonde girl to quickly go to the scene and report back detailed information. However, when he sees the blonde girl joking around, Yuki becomes angry and intends to eliminate her on the spot. But Yamato stops him in time, advising that it's better to let her live and be human, as she is still an important asset of this country. At the same time, Palpal is panicking upon discovering that the evidence storage has been broken into. A soldier reports that someone impersonated his voice to authenticate their identity. Palpal hears this and feels weak in his limbs, not understanding how his highest authority could be exploited to open even the SS-level cells that were supposed to be absolutely secure. While everyone is still in confusion, Adonis has used his magic pen to summon technique, firing a giant bullet at the building opposite, an action equivalent to an open declaration of war against the king. When Ekaut arrives at the prison, she quickly handles all the prisoners but finds no trace of Adonis. She immediately receives orders to go to the building that was hit by the bullet. Before leaving, Ekaut does not forget to deal with Palpal before heading to the designated location. In another direction, when Doroka witnesses the giant bullet fired straight into the building, she can only helplessly sigh, unable to stop Adonis's reckless action. News of the attack quickly spreads across news channels, with the media unanimously reporting and claiming it is the action of terrorists. In his heart, Adonis understands that if Chloe were alive, she would certainly not be pleased with what he is doing. He recalls Chloe's words that even if one seeks revenge, the dead cannot be brought back to life, and she only wished for Adonis to enjoy a peaceful life. However, the pain from years ago still runs deep in his heart, making it impossible for him to forget. Ignoring the warnings, Adonis again uses his magic pen to create a giant robot named Grand. Panicked citizens call the residency office, but initially, they don't believe it, thinking there's no such thing as a giant. Only when a car crashes into the scene and the driver frantically mentions seeing a giant does the officer directly witness the scene and hurriedly confirm the truth. Meanwhile, Adonis is controlling Gran to head straight for Goth's castle. The bad news quickly reaches Yamato, who immediately orders the army to prioritize defending the fourth line, while deploying air support, because if local warfare breaks out in the hot zone, both infantry and armor must be mobilized. Yamato is amazed to see the giant Gran operating so smoothly. Yuki observes that Adonis has disappeared, suggesting that this robot is being controlled by magic. Hearing this, Yamato immediately asks his subordinates about the magic cancellation device and learns that it is currently stored in the submarine hangar. Without hesitation, he immediately assigns the task of bringing that device to Yuki. Each step Gran takes causes the ground to shake, tall buildings along the way quickly turning into ruins, causing people to flee in terror. Defense Line B promptly deploys cannons to attack, but the projectiles are deflected by Adonis's magical power. Not stopping there, Gran swings its giant fist, collapsing entire buildings, causing a series of cannons to be destroyed as well. For the past 10 years, Adonis has been imprisoned in an infinite simulation room, where he had to find the optimal method of genocide. During that time, he learned how to help ordinary people use magic through summoning technique. He understands and grasps the mechanism of magic and converts it into mathematics using the special pen. Without a good teacher's guidance, Adonis would not have reached this level. He always considers all citizens benefiting from the Lydia Empire as accomplices of Goth, so Adonis continues to summon 2 more types of heavy weapons and begins the massacre. Nevertheless, he feels no pleasure in his heart, only more suffering. When Ikout discovers Adonis's whereabouts, she immediately informs Yamato, causing him to dispatch air forces for a surprise attack. The attacking force is so strong that many buildings collapse one after another. In one timely rush, someone comes to rescue, then quickly sends the boy to someone else to care for while running alone to stop Adonis. However, due to a small oversight, Doroka is approached by the enemy and tortured to near exhaustion. While chaos reigns outside, Goth is still sitting in his palace. Despite hearing violent sounds, the Empress still reassures him that the country is safe. At that moment, Goth suddenly coughs up blood, realizing that his illness is beyond cure. In his final thoughts, he believes this is a curse but still refuses to repent, as he has always been proud of building a super-technological civilization and eliminating all witches. He still believes that humans can only progress when witches disappear. Outside, a soldier reports to Yamato that civilians are approaching Adonis. Just as he is about to finish that person off, Doroka appears, desperately begging Adonis to stop because she doesn't want to witness more innocent blood being shed. But Adonis immediately crushes the enemy before her eyes, as if to prove that compassion is meaningless. Doroka tearfully says that Chloe would certainly not want him to do these cruel things. Hearing this, Adonis becomes angry, believing that Doroka is just trying to buy time waiting for the enemy to arrive. He screams, vilifying humans, saying they always play dirty tricks just like 10 years ago. When Doroka reveals that she is also a witch, Adonis becomes even more frenzied, because according to him, witches were exterminated long ago. Doroka struggles to explain that they still survived the hunt, then earnestly says that she has come to save Adonis, that she needs his and Chloe's memories to resurrect her. But all these words fall on deaf ears, as Adonis raises his weapon intending to finish Doroka. However, when he sees her face, memories of Chloe flood back, preventing him from striking. Pain surges. Adonis bursts into tears, chokingly asking if what she just said is true. Just as Doroka prepares to take him away, Ikout suddenly appears, coldly delivering a fatal blow through Doroka's body. Many years ago, Doroka had to witness the heartbreaking scene of her kind being brutally massacred by humans. She could not understand why humans would destroy witches, who had done nothing to harm them. In desperation, Doroka wanted to use magic to save everyone, but the magic sealing machine rendered her completely powerless, unable to use any abilities. At that time, Mia believed that Ophelia would know the reason behind everything, so she instructed Doroka to leave this place and report back. Mia gave directions, saying that by following the celestial revelation star, she would be able to find Ophelia's castle. With a tone full of worry mixed with determination, Mia tried to persuade Doroka to leave quickly, while she volunteered to stay behind to delay the human soldiers. In the end, just as she had anticipated, Mia was captured by the enemy and executed on the spot. Back to the present, Doroka has been severely wounded after many battles. In her final breaths, she tries to say a few words of advice to Adonis. But before she can finish, enemy forces arrive, determined to eliminate both of them. They continuously fire fiercely at Adonis. However, those bullets are quickly stopped by the solid shield he creates. Not stopping there, Adonis casts a reversal spell, causing all the fired bullets to instantly return, shooting straight back at the soldiers. Right after that, Ecout appears, immediately firing at him from a considerable distance. However, all her attacks are easily neutralized by Adonis. The young man doesn't hesitate, immediately responding with a maximum level reversal spell, shooting straight at Ecout. His heart is filled with confidence, affirming that humans have no chance to compare with the power of magic, and then declares that he will eliminate all of them, make them taste the desperation just as Chloe once endured. Meanwhile, Yuki has found the magic nullification machine. She is extremely excited, believing that this time she can contribute some strength to Yamato. But at that moment, Theta appears and intervenes, asserting that Yuki cannot activate that machine. Yuki hurriedly contacts Yamato, reporting everything she just heard. According to Theta, science has indeed helped humans enlighten many fields, but there are still too many things they cannot reach, and the type of particle created from the cancellation of magic photons is one of them. This type of particle has the ability to cause cell dysfunction in humans. Hearing this, Yamato remembers that 10 years ago, quite a few soldiers who participated in the witch hunt contracted this strange disease. Theta emphasizes that, although there isn't sufficient evidence, she firmly believes that the scientific particle has an extremely serious impact on the human body. What shocks Yamato even more is that all this truth had been concealed, and he had never been informed. The current world no longer has witches to heal nature, and the air is no longer clean enough to purify the harmful rays. Therefore, if humans come into contact with a large amount of these particles, their bodies will quickly dissolve into dust. Theta also recalls that many years ago, the king once stood in front of this machine to speak. As a result, his illness became extremely serious. Yamato feels helpless, as outside, Adonis is still frantically massacring everyone. Although aware that the machine harbors a terrible danger, Yuki still resolutely runs to start it. Theta has no choice but to order everyone to evacuate, while she immediately gives chase. But it's too late. While Adonis is smiling arrogantly, enjoying his victory, he accidentally drops his magic feather pen. Yamato immediately asks Theta what happened, but she conceals the truth, advising him to focus on eliminating the target in front of them. Yamato suddenly awakens, immediately ordering all troops to attack simultaneously. Adonis hurriedly rushes to pick up the pen, but surprisingly, someone dashes straight toward him. A building suddenly collapses, blocking the path between Adonis and the soldiers. However, that girl still doesn't falter, resolutely moving forward, and in the blink of an eye, taking Adonis's head. When she brings the head back to her comrades for inspection, everyone bursts into joy, believing they have truly defeated the witch's disciple. Nevertheless, Yamato remains cautious, not allowing anyone to celebrate too early. He immediately orders the retrieval of Adonis's body, while also requesting an assessment of the damage across the entire capital, organizing rescue teams to support affected citizens. At this moment, Yamato notices that the soldier who just killed Adonis is still very young. A subordinate wants to further check her identity, but he shakes his head, thinking it unnecessary, then asks them to check on Theta and Yuki's condition. Both are severely injured and have been taken to the hospital. Afterward, the king gives a speech to the public. He admits that 10 years ago, he made a mistake by sparing Adonis's life, which led to the tragic outcome we see today. He believes that how a human could control magic remains a mystery, but he deeply regrets not dealing with him earlier. However, the king also reassures everyone that they need not worry too much, because with the power the empire now possesses, they will never submit to any force. He declares that God is dead, the old era has ended, and from now on, this country is God, holding the fate of all humanity. In a classroom, a male student wonders why Adonis sided with the witches. The teacher cannot give a definite answer, only suggesting that perhaps he was brainwashed. Unexpectedly, a female student stands up, accusing Eri of abandoning her boyfriend in danger without helping. Eri can only explain that, in that situation, she truly couldn't do anything. After class, Eri quietly brings flowers to pay respects to her boyfriend. She had wanted to save Takuma, but when someone's head fell, she had to flee. Now, Eri takes out a picture of Adonis, admiring his cool appearance. Suddenly, a bespectacled young man appears, startling her as she realizes he's from the state. She intends to delete the photo, but he says it's not necessary, only warning her to be careful as Adonis is still considered a criminal. As soon as Eri leaves, he immediately reports to Charmy that this girl is under Adonis's influence, seeing him as an inspiration. Because of this, Eri is at risk of being arrested, possibly even executed or sent to a slave camp. Soon after, a subordinate comes to inform that the verification process is complete, and Oz quickly returns to see Charmy, whom he loves. Meanwhile, another girl expresses dissatisfaction, hoping her transfer request will be accepted, as her current job requires her to sell her labor almost 24/7 to capitalism, causing her efficiency to decline. Not long after, Charmy announces a shocking result. Adonis's corpse is actually a fake. Meanwhile, the real Adonis is still alive, but he is experiencing pain that seems to reach the sky. His body temperature spikes, his heartbeat becomes irregular, and his blood pressure surges as if to tear apart his chest. The cause stems from the fact that the human body is inherently too fragile, almost unable to withstand the process of dimensional spatial transfer. Just when it seems he will lose consciousness, Ophelia suddenly appears. She advises everyone absolutely not to give up, then personally stimulates Adonis's brain, causing his consciousness to gradually return. When he opens his eyes, the first memory that floods Adonis's mind is the scene of himself being executed by the girl with glasses. However, the truth is completely different. She used a replication spell to create a fake death, helping Adonis escape. That person is the witch Anna, and she, along with Doroka, secretly infiltrated this empire with the sole purpose of taking Adonis away to prepare for Chloe's resurrection. Anna desperately begs Ophelia to help take Adonis to safety. So his body is immediately enveloped, curled into a ball shape, and slowly flies straight up into the sky. Ophelia expresses deep gratitude because Adonis has fought for the witches. But contrary to expectation, the young man shows distance, immediately dismisses her gratitude, and sternly asks who she really is. At this point, Ophelia clearly introduces that where they stand is the land of witches. She takes Adonis to admire the scenery, meeting other witches. Everyone tells him that Chloe used to treat them extremely well. When Adonis sees Ophelia from afar, he decides to approach her himself, but is immediately stopped, as the journey has put tremendous pressure on his human body. Meanwhile, Ophelia recounts that Chloe was a witch who was both powerful and kind. Although she carried the ice element, she radiated warmth like the sun, making anyone who came into contact with her admire her. Unfortunately, Chloe was expelled from the witch land. Hearing this, Adonis immediately objects that no one expelled Chloe, but rather she left on her own. The reason was that she had taught magic to humans, which was forbidden. Chloe never told him clearly, but because they had been together for a long time, Adonis soon understood this. Ophelia explains that magic is the priceless soul of witches, evidence of the friendship and devotion that God bestowed to guide humanity. Originally, witches were not allowed to teach magic to humans, but Chloe chose to do so, taking Adonis as her student. When begged by other witches to give up, she just bowed her head in apology and resolutely held on to that choice. After recalling those memories, Ophelia presents the magic feather pen. Upon seeing it, Adonis immediately panics, rushing forward, but trips before he can touch it. He remembers Chloe once described that the pen was adorned with ripples, inlaid with red dragon eyes, and attached with phoenix feathers. All contained great magical power. Ophelia returns it to him, while guessing that Chloe herself had crafted this gift. When hearing that she could help resurrect Chloe, Adonis's heart feels relieved of a burden. At that moment, he looks up and accidentally sees Earth. Ophelia explains that this place is called the Silent Star, where witches have hidden themselves for the past 10 years to preserve their lives. She adds that science once liberated the nature of humans, but because God wanted to limit their broad vision, he created Earth in a spherical shape. She continues to lead Adonis to visit the graves of fallen witches. Ophelia explains that humans often bind themselves with empty rhetoric, such as, "It's darkest before dawn," or "The opposite of love is indifference." But reality is different. The closer to dawn, the brighter the light, and the opposite of love is not indifference but hatred. The king had exploited these narratives to spread the idea that witches were the cause of humanity's fall. Upon returning, Ophelia takes Adonis to the Mito tree, the sacred life tree of witches. This is the first time he sees it with his own eyes, as Chloe rarely spoke about this place. Since witches have only one gender and no concept of lovers, the Mito tree is the source of life for them. This is also the last tree brought from Earth, as all other trees have been burned by humans. The Mito tree has the ability to control the birth and rebirth of witches. Adonis looks up and briefly sees someone who looks very much like Chloe, but Ophelia explains that it's just a witch waiting to be born. She adds that magic is the realization of idealistic thought in a materialistic world. Adonis's summoning technique skill can transform infinitely, because memory is life. By transferring his memories of Chloe into the life fruit of the Mito tree, she will be reborn. Ophelia affirms that when Adonis is ready, the ceremony will be conducted. While Adonis is still gazing at the Mito tree, Anna suddenly appears. She can't hide her anger as Daroka had to die just because of Adonis. But he remains indifferent, believing that the entire plan was created by them. He never forced anyone. Anna snaps, accusing humans of being too selfish to think they can use the Mito tree to resurrect Chloe as many times as they wish. Adonis clearly understands that the reason witches saved him was because of that feather pen. Previously, Daroka had also revealed that witches intended to exploit Chloe. He questions if witches could originally live well in space without needing protection. Why would they build such a showy place like this? Ultimately, this is just a giant birdcage for humans. Witches had kidnapped humans here through dimensional spatial displacement, forcing them to learn summoning techniques and turning them into fighting tools. The reason is that the witch faction is on the verge of extinction, so they must do everything to resist humans. Adonis realizes that only Chloe could craft the feather pen, so all purposes aim to resurrect her. Anna proposes cooperation, as she cannot accept that Daroka's sacrifice was in vain. Adonis agrees that he will definitely resurrect Chloe, but also affirms that if witches intend to manipulate him, they will still be enemies. By evening, the ceremony at the Mito tree is held. Adonis begins to use memory summoning, transferring them into the life fruit. Each memory of Chloe appears clearly, from the times they read the names of constellations together, to the moment Chloe created the Adonis constellation just to tease him, though later she couldn't even remember coming up with it. Adonis recalls accidentally seeing Chloe's body covered with wounds, and being scolded as a peeping Tom, making him blush with embarrassment. He even advised Chloe to bathe quickly, or else the enemy would trace them. Once, Chloe suddenly burst into tears, holding his hand tightly and chokingly thanking him, saying that without Adonis, she couldn't have continued living until now. Currently, while transferring memories into the Mito tree, Adonis tearfully expresses his love for Chloe, believing that finally she will return. But surprisingly, the person reborn is not Chloe, but Daroka. Adonis chose to resurrect Daroka instead of Chloe, because deep down he didn't want Chloe to continue suffering more pain. So he applied a substitution spell to overwrite the previous formula and forced himself to make the decision to resurrect Daroka, while also not feeling indebted to her anymore. When Daroka woke up, she was extremely surprised to see everyone standing there. She suddenly realized she didn't have a piece of cloth covering her body, so she hurriedly apologized to Adonis. The young man quickly gave her clothes and affirmed that from now on they no longer owed each other anything. Hearing this, Ophelia expressed disappointment, saying they had risked saving Adonis and spent effort healing him. Yet the result was not Chloe but only Daroka. Many witches angrily reproached Adonis for not respecting his teacher. Some even suspected that Daroka had given him a love potion. Adonis firmly denied and affirmed this was entirely his own decision. After finishing his words, Adonis suddenly created a huge explosion to burn the Mito tree. It was thanks to the tremors and light emitted from it that Yamato tracked down their location and quickly summoned troops. Adonis declared that he deliberately invited him to this cemetery to determine victory or defeat. Suddenly, Anna used storm magic to extinguish the flames to save the Mito tree. However, in a brief moment, a soldier suddenly attacked, causing Anna's head to fly off. Ophelia immediately ordered Maja to use enhancement magic to increase the strength of all witches to fight to the death with the enemy. Adonis deployed his summoning technique, but was approached by Yamato, who left a mark on his face. Nevertheless, he quickly grabbed the gun and counterattacked. The young man continuously fired at Yamato. However, Daroka appeared and stopped him. At that moment, the pink-haired witch cast a gem spell to protect her comrades. Dakia summoned the serpent god to destroy soldiers, while Gianna deployed a puppet spell. Then Ophelia used physical manipulation to lift all the soldiers into the air. Although they tried to shoot back, the bullets were bent. When Ophelia gathered them into a giant ball, she immediately crushed them all. Just as victory seemed to belong to the witches, a second army suddenly arrived and caused serious casualties. During this time, Theta was observing all the developments when she was questioned. The old man asked why witches who were supposed to be extinct still existed. Theta presented a prototype teleportation device coded DAT-89. She explained that because there was a new version, the old prototype was discarded into space at the same time as the witch elimination campaign many years ago. Unfortunately, the witches had found this device and used human science to escape into space, then built structures on the moon to disguise themselves, making it difficult for humans to detect. The superior was angry because he had publicly announced to the people that the war with witches was over. Now the truth revealed meant he bore an indelible stain. Even if Theta were executed, it wouldn't erase the mistake. The intelligence chief immediately demanded he shut up and focus on handling the emergency. Elsewhere, Yamato visited Yuki, who was lying in a glass chamber recovering. She had accompanied him for many years, was one of the youngest to hold the position of deputy director, so he was all the more pained when recalling Theta's promise to save Yuki, but the result was so cruel. Yamato placed all blame on Adonis. He clenched his fist, raised his arm strength to 500 pH, then stood up challenging Adonis to a duel. Without further hesitation, Yamato charged forward, throwing a punch wanting to dislocate his opponent's jaw. While fighting, he cursed him as a contemptible heretic. He declared that once this battle ended, he would leave to find a peaceful place to live with Yuki. After saying this, he used the shadowless slash to cut through the witch's pain. The sharp sword blade caused Daroka's body to be cut in half. Fortunately, Anna used her replication spell in time to save her, but had to sacrifice herself, leaving Daroka in anguish. Headquarters wanted to hear reports, but the video signal was distorted. Daroka, witnessing her kind falling in a sea of blood, desperately begged both to stop. But Yamato had reported that he had dealt with almost all the witches and just needed to take down Adonis to end everything. Hearing this, Adonis cast a fire spell and charged forward for direct combat. He enhanced his arm strength, then delivered a heavy punch, causing Yamato to be seriously injured. But the opponent managed to recreate his sword and continue fighting. Adonis contemptuously believed Yamato only relied on cheap tricks. The witch side painfully realized the last Mito tree had been burned, meaning no more witches would be born. In that moment, a blue-haired witch maintained her spirit, advising everyone not to give up, but to join forces with Adonis so no one would have to sacrifice anymore. But before she could do anything, she was ambushed and killed by Yamato's army. At that moment, Yamato switched to using electrothermal power, throwing Adonis far away, then suddenly pierced his sword straight into his chest. He mocked Adonis for being too immature, but then realized his opponent had created a giant sword and cut off his arm. Yamato, in extreme pain, had to urgently stop the bleeding. Adonis looked into his eyes and recognized that both carried the same desire for revenge. Meanwhile, the remaining witches were kneeling, begging soldiers to spare their lives, but in vain. Adonis, gradually exhausted, was continuously pressured by Yamato. At the Science Bureau, people were urgently tracking traces of both sides because all cameras had been destroyed. Suddenly, they received a signal from a single device. After connecting the image to the screen, they witnessed Yamato standing there, boldly declaring that the human side had won and requesting to quickly inform His Majesty that all witches had been eliminated. A few minutes before Yamato killed Adonis, Daroka suddenly ordered him to stop. Adonis was amused to realize that the girl possessed an extremely powerful love magic. The surrounding soldiers had also been bound by that power to the point where their limbs were completely immobilized. Daroka demanded Yamato introduce his name, and although unwilling, his mouth was forced to speak according to her will. Yamato maintained a tough attitude and demanded Daroka immediately release the spell, but she continued using the power of love to restrain him. Adonis, witnessing this scene, immediately suggested that Daroka should take Yamato's life immediately. However, the girl just gently extended her hand as if wanting to reconcile. She hoped Yamato would admit that both sides would no longer continue fighting. In return, the witches would also cease hostilities, and if Yamato accepted, all binding spells would be dispelled. Adonis was furious, believing all of Daroka's kind had sacrificed. Yet she was foolish enough to allow a human to survive and return to Earth. He even warned that if Daroka didn't finish Yamato, she would lose her life. And indeed, Yamato had defied the magic and thrown a punch without hesitation at the girl. He became angry and continuously insulted witches, saying as long as they existed, the world would suffer disaster. The clearest evidence being Adonis had massacred innocent civilians indiscriminately. Yamato emphasized that if witches had never existed, that bloodthirsty demon would not have been born and Yuki would not have fallen into a coma lying in a glass chamber. Daroca immediately refuted, saying human hands were also stained with blood, and the witch hunt 10 years ago along with today's battle had caused heavy losses on both sides. She believed humans already possessed scientific treasures, so they didn't need witches. But that didn't mean they had the right to eliminate all of them. Therefore, Daroca truly wanted the war to end right here. Yamato, of course, did not accept, so she had to use magic to restrain him. He tried to maintain his mind by remembering his ideals and responsibilities. However, memories of happiness being next to a woman caused him to waver and finally agree to follow Daroca's words. Unfortunately, Adonis quickly swung his sword straight at his face, then took his head. He fully understood Daroca possessed the power to enchant hearts, so he asked her to use it to destroy everyone. That night, the king received news that forces under Yamato were still fighting, and they were facing fierce resistance from the witches. The communication signal was troubled, so the situation could not be clearly determined. He knew Adonis was also there, so immediately believed Yamato would hardly escape death. This news made his mood excited. Goth even remarked that witches were just a bunch of cowards running to the moon. He continued to praise the queen's beauty, then hugged her tightly and boasted that he had successfully eliminated the witch's nest. The servant beside noticed the king was originally weak from illness, but his delirium now became too unusual. The queen only needed to gently caress to make Goth obedient like a puppy. The truth was she had used love magic to manipulate him. She expressed gratitude because he had initiated the witch hunt and said now he could rest. The magic made the king willing to sacrifice according to her wishes. Goth then stepped onto the high platform despite the soldiers' prevention. He continued to praise his achievements in developing science and turning Lydia into a powerful country, while affirming everything was thanks to the queen's instructions. Because he was under a spell when she ordered, he immediately pressed the button to end his life, after which the queen dispelled the magic for him. Seeing this, the soldiers asked for reinforcements because certainly a witch had appeared here. But the queen said Goth had just slipped and fallen, so he also obeyed. She turned to ask the man beside if he had any opinion about her actions, but he did not object because he believed that Puppet had lost its exploitation value. Because the queen's magic could only control men, she was forced to eliminate her own kind. She affirmed she had no intention of ruling the world but only needed the head of one person. He replied that she could rest assured because the head of the embodied divine spirit was equally valuable. The queen then made him call out her maiden name, who was originally a cross-universe witch and had come here to take back a person. Meanwhile, Adonis proposed to cooperate with Daroca, but she refused. Even alone, he was still capable of dealing with the soldiers. Daroca planned to use magic to stop him, but Adonis warned that if she dared do so, there would only be death. After saying that he continued his bloodthirsty game, Daroca still tried to persuade that hatred only breeds more hatred, but Adonis was completely blinded by reason. All her words were useless, and he unhesitatingly strangled numerous soldiers. Ending the massacre, Adonis approached to take Yamato's head, then used the voice-changing spell. At the Science Bureau, they could not contact the battlefield. The entire electrical system suddenly shut down. They received a signal from a single device and allowed it to connect. Yamato's image appeared to report that his side had won. The battle was so fierce that all soldiers had sacrificed. He said he would return to Earth himself and didn't need assistance. However, with just a glance, they discovered it wasn't Yamato. Right after asking them to open the way back, Adonis immediately removed the face skin. Ophelia saw and realized he had planned this from the beginning. He didn't even show any emotion when sacrificing all the witches. Afterwards, Adonis grabbed Daroca, intending to take her along because her magic was extremely useful. Daroca immediately slapped him and said if Chloe saw this appearance, she would certainly be disappointed. Not long after, both began to be transported back to Earth. Ophelia bid farewell and did not forget to curse Adonis that he would be punished by the gods. She also apologized for not being able to reclaim the pride for witches. At that time, the Science Bureau had completed positioning for the journey. Everyone immediately prepared weapons to wait for the moment Adonis touched ground, then would fire a fierce rain of bullets to avenge Yamato. However, the young man had changed the teleportation coordinates to another location, which once again left the opponent helpless as he escaped. At that moment, Adonis and Daroca were standing in the middle of a desert, still nurturing the intention to conquer Lydia step by step. Just before that, during the teleportation process, Adonis had secretly programmed a change in destination to avoid falling into a trap, and now he planned to attack towns and villages one by one to gather more information, food, medicine, and supplies in preparation for the upcoming battle. At that moment, Daroca suddenly collapsed due to her longing to return to her familiar people. Adonis said that in the current situation no witch could survive, but Daroca still insisted on returning. She blamed Adonis for only being immersed in hatred and rushing headlong into the path of revenge. Hearing this, Adonis made her see past memories, when Daroca herself had earnestly begged both sides to find a way to reconcile. Years ago, she wanted to know what kind of person Chloe's student really was. She even believed that he would be the bridge to help humans and witches find common ground. But the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Daroca asked Adonis how long he would continue like this. Because if both sides kept retaliating against each other, the war would never end, and hatred would forever exist in this world. But Adonis didn't care. To him, Chloe's life was more important than the existence of humanity. Humans had taken her away, so he would destroy them to repay the blood debt. Daroca painfully blamed him for causing so many witches to die by calling humans to them. Adonis asserted that doing so helped him find his way back to Earth, even mockingly saying that Daroca's kind had done a very good job of distracting. Daroca angrily scolded him for being cruel in disregarding the lives of witches. Immediately after, Adonis choked her and condemned her for betraying her own kind by daring to forgive humans. For him, revenge was his reason for living, as he had nothing else to lose. When Adonis turned away, Daroca quickly rushed to stop him, saying that his life still remained, which was what Chloe wanted to protect. No matter how cruel the world was, she hoped his heart would not be tainted. Daroca didn't exactly forgive the sins that humans had committed. But if Adonis continued to sink in hatred, his heart would gradually die, becoming no different from those who had killed Chloe. But Adonis viewed revenge as the only proof of his existence. If he stopped, all traces of Chloe would also vanish. Having said this, Adonis fainted from losing too much blood. At that moment, a group of people driving cars appeared. Seeing the two in an awkward position, they assumed this was a couple secretly in love who had run away from home. The next morning, Adonis woke up in a state of being bandaged, vaguely remembering that Daroca had begged the group to save his life the night before. Old Punch approached to check on him but only received a deadly glare from Adonis. However, he wasn't afraid, even inviting him to take a sip of alcohol to regain strength. Adonis coldly refused, considering it no different from wastewater. Punch burst into laughter, saying he dared to look down on humanity's greatest invention. Adonis guessed this place wasn't under Lydia's control, then asked about Daroca's whereabouts. Punch replied that she had been taken away for entertainment. Hearing this, Adonis immediately tensed up in alert, causing Punch to pull him outside and introduce that this was the waste plain, a result of the super-industrial revolution. The people here were all waste people, either escaped slaves, people from poor countries, or even rejected scientists. Suddenly, Adonis heard Daroca's voice begging to stop, then caught sight of several men surrounding her with sinister eyes. Punch said that women were rare in this area, so those guys wanted to take advantage of the opportunity. Adonis immediately rushed over to intervene, but surprisingly discovered Daroca was just performing a show with a warhorse to entertain them. When she saw Adonis, she was so happy that she hurriedly ran over and fell flat on her face. Afterwards, she gave him 2 dolls as an apology for having blamed him. But Adonis coldly threw them away, breaking her heart. Punch then announced that there would be a party tonight. Everyone was excited, and told Adonis and Daroca to lend a hand in return. In the evening, Daroca was busy serving, bringing beer continuously. A one-eyed man paid attention to her, his eyes lighting up whenever he looked at her, and even having improper intentions. But Daroca quickly gave him 2 fake cakes to play with himself. While having fun with everyone, Daroca suddenly caught Adonis's cold gaze. Some people thought they had argued, but Daroca immediately denied it. People then guessed that they were both homeless, so they had to wander here. She answered that they were wanderers traveling around the world, making everyone burst into laughter because they had never heard anyone call themselves wanderers. Unexpectedly, everyone collapsed because Adonis had secretly put sleeping drugs in the wine. He blamed Daroca, a witch who didn't realize it, leaving her speechless. Seeing him holding a gun, she said the people here were originally very good. They had saved his life and treated him. But Adonis coldly replied that he wouldn't kill, as waste people weren't worthy for him to dirty his hands. He realized he no longer needed Daroca. Since Chloe's death, he couldn't laugh like her, so they were fundamentally too different. Daroca tried to explain that she only wanted to blend in with humans to avoid suspicion. But deep in her heart, she also knew pain and hurt. Adonis just coldly said that if so, she shouldn't become someone like him, then turned and left. The next morning, the dinosaur appeared to comfort Daroka. Punch blamed Adonis for being ungrateful by leaving without thanking, even abandoning someone's daughter. Meanwhile, Adonis suddenly remembered Daroka's warnings. The sound of a car from afar made him immediately become alert. Punch had recognized that Adonis was Chloe's student because years ago when he was dying, he had been helped by both of them. He had also witnessed their relationship, so he understood why Adonis hated the whole world. Punch said that Daroka's ideal might be right, but whether revenge was good or bad, no one could decide. It was still Adonis's choice. As for Daroka, she didn't want anyone else to sacrifice anymore. She was determined to protect him at all costs. Hearing this, Punch gave her a warhorse to chase after him. Soon, Daroka caught up with Adonis. She expressed her desire to accompany him, believing he would need her, and also reminded that going alone would be very dangerous, so they should go together to support each other. Adonis found her annoying, but in his heart was somewhat moved by her persistence. Because Daroka didn't know how to stop the car, he had to hurry after her, while Punch just stood watching from afar and silently hoped Adonis wouldn't make that girl cry. At the same time, in the Lydia Kingdom, the atmosphere was very lively as people eagerly prepared for the Queen's coronation. High above, Oz still silently observed all developments, waiting for the important moment approaching. The host had mentioned Emperor Goth, who had laid the foundation for the Great Industrial Revolution, while expanding territory, bringing human civilization to a new peak. It was thanks to him that humans restored their pride. They no longer had to rely on the power of witches. Unfortunately, Goth could not defeat the vicious disease. However, today, the subjects all decided to temporarily set aside their sadness to welcome the new queen ascending the throne. When the auspicious hour struck, Dorothea appeared. Her debut was a captivating musical performance that entranced everyone. No one could escape that attraction. Meanwhile, in another place, a group of people watched the queen's performance with unease. They felt that the apocalypse was approaching, as they believed that a witch sitting on the human throne was a terrible thing. They also knew that she had used science to eliminate her own kind without hesitation, which made them believe Dorothea was much more frightening than previous prophecies. After the performance ended, the queen created her own crown. She received enthusiastic praise and countless compliments from everywhere. At the waste plain, Shiro was also watching that performance. He felt his childhood friend shone brilliantly just like a goddess. The real purpose that brought Shiro here was to hunt down Adonis, as he had destroyed Yamato's device, making him unable to determine the desired location. Therefore, Shiro had created countless giant arms to search for traces of Adonis. At that time, Adonis and Daroka were crossing the desert. He said that he would never give up the intention of revenge. Hearing this, Daroka suggested that he should not harm good people like Old Punch. But Adonis refused, while warning her not to obstruct his path. He also mentioned Daroka's special ability, a magic that could manipulate men to adore her. He wondered why during their first meeting, she didn't use it on him. Adonis believed that Ophelia must have ordered Daroka to take him away at all costs. Daroka explained that because it was their first time meeting, she was sure Adonis would not accept that method. The young man fell silent, continuing to drive quickly across the water's surface. After a long journey, they stopped at an abandoned town. Adonis told Daroka to stay while he scouted around, but she begged to go along and promised not to get in the way. She also introduced the magical bag containing 7 essential items that Punch had prepared, including a snow art ball, which had the ability to transform into a tent for both to rest overnight. However, Adonis didn't care much, even walking away first. The desolate scene made Daroka believe this was a cursed town. Next, they entered the largest building to find clues. Adonis warned her to be careful because the structure was too old and dilapidated. The warning had just ended when Daroka was startled by seeing mice running out. Adonis's judgmental gaze made her quickly apologize. However, Daroka's clumsiness continued to cause other troubles. She constantly had accidents and made noise, causing Adonis to angrily threaten that if she kept screaming, he would leave her behind. Suddenly, a strange man greeted Daroka, shocking her. It turned out to be just a police officer recreated in 3-dimensional image. He introduced the areas in the building. Adonis recognized this, so he just told her to continue. But Daroka still repeatedly apologized and promised not to do anything suspicious. They continued to probe everywhere until they approached an old prison. Here, Adonis heard singing and entered. They met an old man. Daroka greeted, but he didn't hear, forcing her to shout loudly, startling him. The old man was surprised to see people appear, as this place had long been uninhabited. Doroka explained that they were just travelers passing through. Adonis asked why he stayed alone. The old man replied that he was a prisoner. Hearing this, Adonis immediately turned away because he thought this place was full of useless and disgusting things. The old man recounted that anyone who had ever come here also said similar things before leaving. He repeated that even witches, whom humans had exterminated, were also gone. So why did people still have to live forever in such a backward place? He added that there was once a time when people carried countless great expectations, eagerly setting out. But then times changed. He felt the present was no different from the witch hunting period, when just one person raised their voice, someone would immediately follow. Adonis asked if he knew of any nearby urban areas. The old man replied that there was a city named Mamta, about 70 kilometers east of here. Seeing Adonis leave, Doroka hurriedly apologized and ran after him. On the way, Doroka said that if they left the old man like that, he would starve to death. As this town no longer had any people, she wanted to share food. Adonis replied that it was none of their business, while pointing out that the prison door wasn't locked. What the old man needed wasn't food, but silence to not be disturbed anymore. At that time, the old man was still whispering apologies to his deceased wife for not having finished the unfinished song. Then he held her hand tightly and cried, saying that those who had imprisoned and executed her were no longer here. From now on, they could be together forever. However, he still blamed himself for not being able to protect the one he loved. After hearing Adonis's explanations, Doroka could only remain silent. Finally, they continued their journey, heading towards the city of Mamta. Soon after, they both saw the gate leading into the city-state. Doroka speculated that Adonis would certainly use violence, and in fact he intended to act that way. She thought a large city like this must possess countless soldiers and an enormous arsenal, so no matter how strong Adonis was, it would be difficult to avoid danger. Doroka came up with the idea of playing rock, paper, scissors to determine who wins, and the loser must obey, but Adonis flatly rejected that suggestion. When entering, she looked around and realized the surrounding scenery was only ruins. This desolation made Adonis angry because everywhere was just useless places when all had been destroyed. Suddenly, Doroka called him to stop because there was a woman ahead. She immediately ran to the other side, while Adonis just reminded her to be careful. When she saw the person in a dying state, Doroka quickly took off her cloak to cover them. However, she kept hearing the other person repeat the words, "Hurry up," so she thought she was running away from someone. Adonis immediately said it wasn't human, then pulled Doroka away. Soon the figure revealed itself to be a robot and rushed to attack. Adonis immediately fired and took it down. He said it was just a doll machine, a toy for humans. At that moment, they both heard reverberating sounds coming from a nearby building along with the voices of other doll machines. Adonis decided to go in to investigate, but told Doroka to stay outside. She wanted to follow, so he got angry and threatened that if she didn't listen, she would be abandoned here, while reminding that if anything happened, she should shout loudly for him to come rescue. However, shortly after, Doroka was still curious and approached the source of the sound. She was horrified to see piles of doll machines stacked into mountains. Adonis used magic to create glowing butterflies to light the way. Doroka didn't listen at all but silently followed because she told herself she had promised Punch that she wouldn't let him fall into danger. She believed that even if discovered, Adonis would forgive her. But the memory of being left behind at the waste plain last time made her afraid. She reassured herself that it was her fault that day. Adonis, though scary, was not a tyrant. However, she then remembered the scene when he had grabbed her hair in anger, making her heart ache, tears unconsciously flowing. Suddenly Adonis appeared with a face full of killing intent. Doroka hurriedly apologized and seriously suggested that they should journey together. She even affirmed that she carried a food bag, so she would certainly be useful. This time Adonis agreed, making Doroka overjoyed. Going a bit further, they encountered the heavy smell of death emanating from a room. When the door opened, before their eyes was the scene of numerous doll machines surrounding a dead man. Adonis realized all were produced by Lydia. They begged to be loved, angrily questioning why humans programmed them with such painful aspirations. He immediately helped them end their shameful lives. Meanwhile, the spy team on their mission encountered Lydia's guards. Number 5 unhesitatingly threw knives to take them down. Number 6 also acted swiftly. In just a moment, all military police were eliminated. Back to Adonis, he was recalling witch Ophelia's words that scientific progress liberates human nature. A world that values pleasure would certainly create female beings to satisfy lust. Adonis picked up the handcuffs Daroca once wore at Lydia, then remarked that no matter how developed, it would be difficult to buy large quantities of high-ranking money to own quality goods. So humans had to offer women. Monto was an example of selling all the country's women to Lydia. Many men even abandoned their wives and children just to exchange for pleasure. Finally, the nation perished because there were no more women and children. Adonis contemptuously believed that other countries would eventually share the same fate, showing that the super revolution that humanity worshipped was actually despicable. Afterward, the two brought several machines to the repair place. Adonis wanted to create a temporary IBM. Daroca was puzzled and didn't understand. He explained that the purpose was to liberate the souls of those poor dolls, then use remaining impact magic to send them off. Daroca was touched and thought being beside him was good. Right at this moment, the spy team was silently monitoring. Number 5 assessed Adonis as still young, but Number 6 knew he had once shocked all of Lydia, attacking alone to avenge the witch hunt, massacring civilians, then eliminating the elite army. They believed that although the country didn't want to be involved with witches, if they could control Lydia, they still had to take advantage. Both thought that if they achieved a great merit, they would certainly be rewarded and could live together in the capital, so they decided to act. Number 5 would deal with Adonis while Number 6 would handle Daroca. Meanwhile, Shiro was also observing and smiled wickedly. Soon both sides confronted each other. The old man showed no fear before the attacks. Daroca at this time set up a memorial tablet as a resting place for the dolls. Adonis coldly said crying was useless. Whether building tombs or praying were just ways for the living to avoid reality. The only thing to console them was to make humans pay the price. Daroca had a different view, so Adonis told her to stay, saying he had killed countless witches, so advised her to reconsider following him. Daroca immediately brought out dolls of both of them to avoid arguing. She even admitted witches were also at fault for using him. Wanting a tool against humans, they kidnapped him to resurrect Chloe. Hearing this, Adonis softened and apologized, suggesting they continue together. Daroca was overjoyed, thinking they were now friends, but Adonis told her to throw away that ugly doll if she wanted his acceptance. Daroca jokingly said it looked exactly like him, and even boasted that she could sing. Suddenly Shiro appeared, cutting her off. He told them to stop flirting because it made him jealous. Before Adonis could act, Shiro had destroyed the car and declared he came today only to take his life. Adonis didn't back down but felt excited because it had been a long time since he met a worthy opponent to kill. At that time, Charmy and her teammates were silently monitoring, observing every step of Adonis and Daroca. The atmosphere in the room had only the sound of soft breathing and sounds from the surveillance system. The reason this group could trace his tracks was because the illegal teleportation coordinates that Adonis had used were still stored on the server. Charmy's eyes clearly showed weariness. She coldly told Shiro to quickly deal with Adonis because she didn't want to prolong the mission any longer and especially didn't want to work overtime. Shiro didn't seem to be in a hurry. He replied that words spoken beforehand rarely become reality, and he wanted everything to be under his own control. Meanwhile, Adonis felt a rising uneasiness in his heart. He didn't expect to be discovered so soon. Seeing Shiro holding 2 human heads in his hands, Adonis frowned and asked whose they were. The old man smiled a grotesque smile while playing with those frightening things, then casually replied that they were just uninvited guests, whom he had conveniently eliminated a few minutes ago to avoid being bothered. The answer made Daroca shudder with anger. She loudly told Shiro to stop that sick game immediately, but in an instant, he had lunged forward, grabbing her face tightly as a way of showing his authority and warning. Adonis couldn't bear it anymore. He quickly pushed Daroca behind him, then immediately cast a summoning spell to confront the dangerous enemy before him. However, before he could gain an advantage, he received a blow heavy as a sledgehammer, his body being thrown nearly 8 meters away. Not allowing himself to be knocked down, Adonis stood up, immediately firing a barrage of bullets toward Shiro. Nevertheless, the old man still calmly avoided as if this was just a game. Adonis gritted his teeth, concentrated his strength, then fired a giant bullet. Seeing this, Charmy outside anxiously reminded Shiro not to directly block the attack. Shiro lowered himself, letting that terrible bullet rush straight forward, then quickly rushed to where Adonis was. In the urgent situation, Daroca disregarded danger, using the love magic she possessed to restrain Shiro. Seeing her daring, Adonis, while dodging, praised that she had done very well, while wanting to take the opportunity to force Shiro to reveal his abilities as well as the type of weapon he was using. However, the unexpected happened. Daroca's spell was completely ineffective. Shiro not only wasn't affected, but laughed loudly, mocking that the spell was no different from the technique of the queen years ago, which was also what had manipulated the deceased emperor. To prove it, Shiro slowly tore the cloth on his chest, revealing a bright red heart symbol. Then immediately after, countless giant hands grew from his back, extending like monstrous tentacles. Seeing this scene, Adonis immediately realized this was the distorted result of the so-called super-industrial revolution. The fear in his heart rose again, worried that the tragic past of Chloe might repeat. He ordered Doroka to retreat, but she didn't listen. With determined eyes, Doroka said she wanted to fight with her own strength, not wanting to become a burden. Adonis had no other choice, so he equipped her with a protective armor and a fancy sword, a special weapon covered with magical characters from magic butterflies. He even carefully instructed that this sword could cut through steel, as long as the wielder still had enough strength. He had even prepared a basic sword techniques book for her to learn from. Shiro, looking at this scene, just laughed with contempt, warning the two not to flirt in front of him. Immediately, a series of mechanical hands were released, grabbing and attacking them. Adonis, being experienced, easily broke through, but Doroka struggled to defend, causing Adonis to continuously turn back to support. Recognizing this, Shiro controlled the hands to fly up high, then simultaneously dived down, like a rain of killing intent covering the entire battlefield. Faced with this terrible attack, Adonis had to cast an exorcism spell to block. After that, he decided to use the final killing move, telling Doroka to hold on to him tightly. A giant energy sphere appeared, encompassing both of them, then rolled straight toward Shiro. Charmy shouted a warning, advising Shiro to retreat immediately. But he wasn't afraid, using the ultimate technique Castle of Hummingbirds to directly confront. After a tense struggle, Adonis suddenly leaped out of the sphere, intending to deliver a finishing blow. But Shiro still managed to extend hands to block. This was just a feint, because right after, Doroka unexpectedly charged forward, pouring all her strength into stabbing both of Shiro's legs. To her surprise, he wasn't harmed at all, just coldly saying that to kill him, one must aim for the heart or head. Doroka fell into a dangerous situation. Adonis immediately rushed over, but was hit by a devastating punch from Shiro, causing him to collapse. Doroka was also severely wounded after the attack. Shiro, with a satisfied expression, even praised that the two coordinated quite well with each other. While he was smirking, Adonis gathered strength to tightly bind Shiro's entire body, determined to finish him. But that old fox still had enough strength to counterattack, controlling the hands to break free. Doroka, though bleeding heavily and her body trembling, still tried to stand up, wanting to help him once more. But Shiro was cruel, lifting her high, hanging her suspended in mid-air like a puppet. Adonis was almost helpless, watching Shiro escape from the restraint. His face showed a distorted smile, as he slowly expressed his intention to take away Doroka's eyes right in front of Adonis. In that life or death moment, Doroka just smiled gently. She softly uttered thanks, saying that because of Adonis, she had precious memories, from the time they met until now. She wished she could have stayed with him longer, to view this vast world together. But that simple wish was cruelly extinguished when Shiro coldly took action, stealing her eyes, leaving a scene that made even heaven and earth seem to fall silent. She screamed in ultimate pain, that sound echoing as if tearing the air, stunning Adonis and immediately reminding him of Chloe's tragedy years ago, a haunting memory that had never faded. Before his eyes, everything seemed to repeat, the helplessness and despair pressing on his heart, urging him to rise up with all his strength. Adonis frantically threw off the hands gripping his body, each movement full of desperation but also filled with determination, then rushed to where Shiro was with the hope of saving her. However, fate was cruel as everything was too late. Doroka's eyes had been mercilessly taken, blood flowing covering her pale face. In that moment, Adonis could only press his hand to stop the blood, his eyes trembling and his heart shattered. Though in extreme pain, Doroka still whispered that she was okay, her voice weak but firm, and even advised Adonis to flee. Those words were like daggers, deeply engraved into his helplessness, making him feel as if he himself was being torn into pieces. Completely opposite to the tragedy of the two, Shiro wore a pleasurable smile, as if he was enjoying a cruel entertainment. His eyes were filled with mockery, and his tone even more bitter as he considered all pain just a pleasure. Adonis, in anger, roared that he must return the eyes to Doroka. His eyes blazed with killing intent, the light as if wanting to burn the person in front of him. But Shiro didn't care at all. He calmly crushed what should have been the life of a human. then coldly threatened that he could also take Adonis's eyes, even his life if he wanted. Anger erupted. Adonis charged straight toward the enemy, each step thundering like rolling thunder. But Shiro moved too quickly, his blows sharp as blades. Suddenly, a devastating kick hit Adonis directly in the face, causing the magic pen to fall from his hand. In that brief moment, he still managed to grab Shiro's leg and throw him hard into a nearby wall, leaving a resonating impact. Not stopping, Shiro immediately summoned countless bizarre hands. They rushed toward Adonis, but he calmly used the reversal spell, causing all to turn back and attack their own master. Shiro, however, still escaped. He floated in mid-air, easily avoiding and maintaining a safe distance. Adonis took advantage of the thick smoke around him, quickly carrying Doroka into a nearby building to hide. Blood still flowed continuously. He had to use one of Shiro's severed arms to stem the bleeding for her. Although in pain to the point of seemingly unbearable, Doroka still struggled, apologizing to Adonis with a choked voice. She said she only wished for a day when she could attend the same school as him, to live peaceful days without suffering. That desire was simple but full of bitterness, as the cruel reality had denied everything. Finally, she fainted in Adonis's arms, leaving him with a feeling of deep despair. At that moment, Adonis seemed to fall into the abyss of memory. The image of Chloe reappeared clearly. He blamed himself for being useless and incompetent, when he couldn't even protect a girl by his side. That obsession weighed heavily, making him choke, but also simultaneously igniting the determination not to let tragedy repeat. Meanwhile, Shiro was still frantically searching, the terrifying sound of the arms echoing everywhere, signaling that the battle was far from over. Adonis decided to summon Grand, the weapon that once caused chaos in the capital. Charmy said its destructive power was extremely terrible, enough to change the situation. Shiro, seeing it didn't show fear at all, he even provoked Grand, nearly receiving a humiliating defeat. Adonis forced him to bring the queen, saying that was the only way. Shiro mockingly laughed, disparaging the queen, then once again unleashed dozens of arms to attack. The battle quickly turned into chaos. Grand was destroyed by his brutal technology, and Adonis was also knocked out of the building, his body falling heavily. While he was trying to write a spell, Shiro rushed over to stop him, making him unable to concentrate fully. The two wrestled fiercely, each punch, each kick echoing throughout the space. Shiro continuously blocked, saying that magic always had weaknesses, because after being written it needed time to activate. He laughed mockingly when he thought Adonis was pathetic, just a human daring to fight back. Adonis ignored the insults. He just insisted that Shiro must heal Doroka's eyes. Shiro responded by binding him with a series of arms, leaving no gaps. At that time, Doroka had regained consciousness. Although her eyes had lost their light, she still struggled to find Adonis. Just a few stumbling steps made her fall, but her strong heart still urged her to continue. Shiro, seeing this, pulled Adonis close, threw him hard against the rock wall, then ordered the bizarre arms to continuously harm both. Doroka was frightened and worried for Adonis, but Shiro coldly pressed her against the wall. He cruelly tore her clothes, then delivered another blow that nearly made her collapse on the spot. He recalled that her voice was too similar to the queen's, while confessing that he had been infatuated with the queen from their first meeting, to the point of willingly being a slave for that love. He believed that this world didn't need two similar witches to exist, even if that was just the arrangement of the multiverse. Shiro declared he would finish Adonis, while Doroka chokingly begged him to spare him. She admitted to having witnessed the city being devastated by Adonis's hands, but said that the root cause began with humans when they conducted the witch hunt. She once believed that hatred wasn't everything, once hoped that both sides would stop, but at this moment she wasn't sure if she herself could forgive humans. Hearing this, Shiro immediately stepped hard on her, his voice filled with contempt, while his eyes were only fixed on Adonis with the intention of taking his life. Adonis, in a desperate situation, asked Doroka to use love magic on him. He said that if that could help fight, then becoming a puppet wouldn't matter. Hearing this, Shiro became angry. He poured his fury on both, scolding that they were stubborn for daring to resist. Doroka tearfully apologized to Lo, then began to chant. A giant column of light exploded, encompassing Adonis, causing Shiro to unexpectedly take the full force of the attack. In the flowing memory, Doroka recalled the days in the witch society, where her spell to control men was always considered base. The sisters avoided her. Ophelia also despised her, thinking that such power was not worthy to exist. The contempt made her always live in inferiority, longing for a day to be recognized. Adonis now understood why she always tried to be friendly with everyone. He approached, put a coat on her, and said that she could completely manipulate him. When Daroka chanted the night transformation love spell, Adonis's power exploded beyond imagination. He resisted gravity, healed all wounds, becoming an almost limitless warrior. Shiro panicked when he realized the level of danger. He intended to escape, but it was too late. Adonis, holding the feather pen in his hand, directly gave Shiro a slash right in the chest. Adonis still didn't stop. He continuously ran across the collapsed rooftops, each jump decisive and full of power. Whenever his feet touched the giant hands growing from the void, the young man leaped higher, getting closer to the target. His heart burned, in his eyes shone determination. From afar, Shiro seemed to realize that the opponent before him was no longer the young boy as before, but one who had truly transcended limits. He trembled, his original arrogance had disappeared, replaced by fear gnawing at his soul. In the moment of approach, Adonis didn't hesitate. He grabbed Shiro's head and used all his strength to throw him flying through a series of buildings on the opposite side. The sound of collapse echoed, smoke and dust billowed up. But Adonis didn't stop there. He immediately rushed over, cut off one of Shiro's arms. The painful blow hadn't settled when he took away the leg that had injured Daroka. Shiro howled in pain, his body trembling violently, his mouth stuttering, begging Adonis to spare him, pleading not to finish him off yet. However, Adonis's eyes only contained killing intent. He didn't bother to care about those pleas. The young man raised the magic pen high, each stroke in the air glowing brightly. Soon, a giant light hole appeared in the sky, the entire land immersed in a cold glow. Snow began to fall, those pure white flakes falling lightly onto the gloomy space. Adonis's voice sounded, not for Shiro to hear, but like a reminder to himself. He said this was the type of magic that Chloe once used to save the people from the 100-year drought, and that he had once promised her that he would use it to protect an important person. Shiro at this point was extremely panicked, his face distorted with fear. He understood that if this formula was completed, everything would end. He had to concentrate all his internal energy, a series of giant hands shooting out from his body to attack Adonis. But all seemed meaningless. The young man waved his hand, the movement gentle but full of authority. Immediately all arms were frozen into hard blocks of ice, then simultaneously turned back, attacking their own master. In a desperate situation, Shiro shouted loudly, ordering Daroka to stop Adonis. He said that if they continued, both would die together. But Daroka just shook her head slightly, her voice trembling but firm, saying that Adonis could not freeze because he had bathed himself in fire, and she herself had planted that burning suggestion in his mind. Those words made Shiro go crazy, his face contorting. He used all his strength to rush toward Adonis, but before he could strike, a cold slash took away another arm. At this point, Adonis had almost completed the technique. The sky dyed a pure white, the cold cut flesh and bone. The entire space seemed about to shatter due to the absolute zero temperature. Chami, seeing that scene, trembled, advising Shiro to run away quickly. But in her heart she knew clearly there was no retreat path anymore. Shiro had almost his entire body frozen, pieces of ice breaking out from his body, blocking all hope. At that moment, Adonis destroyed Shiro's device. The entire area immediately turned into a giant ice zone. At the waste plain, people going about their lives suddenly felt a distinct sudden coldness. Each biting wind whipped at their flesh, making everyone shiver. Old Punch, standing high, saw from afar a giant snowstorm forming, frantically ordering everyone to quickly find shelter, otherwise all would freeze to death. But when observing more carefully, he discovered this wasn't ordinary snow, but a fierce hailstorm due to malfunctioning equipment. Meanwhile, human weather satellites also signaled the anomaly. The temperature in the area was dropping at a terrifying rate. The signal from Shiro completely lost connection. No one knew whether he was still alive or dead. Charmy immediately ordered to switch to another satellite image, and when the screen appeared, everyone was shocked to witness a giant storm covering the entire region. This person who had just returned also had to admit that Adonis was truly not an ordinary person. The snowstorm eventually dissipated, but the people still didn't understand what had just happened. Only Old Punch remained silent, his eyes heavy. He knew that such terrible power could sweep away everything, and only hoped those still in the eye of the storm were safe. Adonis was exhausted. In a moment he felt as if Chloe was coming beside him, gently comforting, then disappeared again, returning to the sky where she belonged. Daroka woke up, her body warmer thanks to the armor that Adonis had created in time to protect her. But the young man had collapsed, drained of strength, forcing Doroka to dispel the love spell. She tremblingly checked his heartbeat, then burst into joy when she noticed Adonis's heart was still beating weakly. Shiro at that time, though nearly vanished, still managed to speak. He said that Adonis and Doroka resembled the queen when she was young, then instructed that if they ever meet her, to tell her that he had tried his best, though he couldn't bring back the incarnated divine spirit. With those words, Shiro and the ice block dissolved into nothingness, but in the final moment, he still dreamed of being with the queen in some other world. After everything, Adonis gradually regained consciousness. He vowed that he would find a way to heal Doroka's eyes. The next day, the scene of Queen Dorothea jogging in the middle of the city delighted the people. Reporters jostled to record, broadcasting everywhere. The queen remained friendly, smiling and greeting, making everyone even more respectful. Her going out alone worried her guards, advising that she needed an escort. But Dorothea affirmed she didn't feel endangered, and emphasized that she was waiting for news from the monarchs. If they weren't sensible, she would be forced to start a war. As for Adonis, he gently wrapped a coat around Doroka to keep her warm, then apologized for turning this place into an icy zone. Doroka, after casting the love spell, had clearly felt that the feelings in Adonis's heart were still only directed toward Chloe. She felt guilty, but Adonis affirmed that everything was a voluntary decision. He admitted Shiro was a fearsome opponent, and if it had been one-on-one, perhaps he would have been defeated. The young man had been too confident about human strength. When telling Doroka to lift her bangs, she hesitantly apologized because she feared she looked ugly. Adonis smiled, saying she was clumsy, sometimes a burden, but her heart was extremely kind. He withdrew his previous scolding words, hoping she would be kind to herself. Doroka thought she was being hugged when he wrapped bandages around her eyes, but Adonis just tapped lightly on her head, making her annoyed. He affirmed that love was only for Chloe, and that love spell couldn't shake him. After finishing the bandaging, they continued on their way. On the road, Doroka tripped. Adonis quickly grabbed her hand and pulled her back. He recalled the promise that they would help each other. Right at that moment, Yuki woke up from her long coma. The war goddess returned, declaring she would avenge Yamato. Through everything, Doroka gradually realized that Adonis's path of revenge wasn't wrong.